amid growing concerns about economic growth.
Consumer spending was
As
soft.
expected, cut interest rates another quarter point.
We are following breaking news. All three major American stock markets have closed down.
Bitcoin rose 10%.
Even gave the stock market a temporary second wind.
The market reaction, it was kind of nonplussed.
Tariffs going into effect tomorrow.
But the NASDAQ was also.
Investors will be watching closely for more clues about the direction.
It's time to tune out the noise and tune in to great information with a steward's view. Expect valuable economic updates, investing techniques, and planning concepts that move you to be wise and decide well. You'll be equipped and encouraged in a stewardship mindset, managing God's resources 1 week at a time. You can listen to this podcast and previous episodes at astewardsview.com.
Welcome back. I'm Aaron Kolkman. That's Chaz Louder. Here is Paul Larsen, and this is A Steward's View. So glad you joined us again. Remember to visit this and previous episodes online at astewardsview.com or on your favorite podcast platform. As we continue with this weekly series or regular series, Living Stewardship with Paul Larsen, we'll not focus on economic and market readouts, and instead we'll focus on contextual conversations about day-to-day decision-making as stewards, the people this program is designed to encourage. This series does tie in economics, investments, and planning, but gives context to those things, right? So we've commented on planning based on the promises of money versus the promises of God. So in short, this series will really hover around the gospel of money versus the gospel of the kingdom. So let's get going. Paul, welcome back.
Good to be here.
We talked last time about serving, thriving, and flourishing. We talked about serving God as getting more God. We've begun to define stewardism. Today, we'll spend more time unpacking stewardism and attempt to clarify this mindset. We may touch on stewardism categories like vocational, work that is, relational, like your neighbor, your body, even the poor, financial, like capital, debt, planned giving. So those are things that we can get into, those categories over time. But for this week in particular, I want to make sure that we do clarify the distinction between stewardship and stewardism. And then we'll ask a couple of questions about vocational stewardship in particular. So those are our things for this week. First and foremost, Paul, what are your thoughts as we step back and we look at where we've been and we kind of lean into the idea of stewardism and how it's different from stewardship?
All right. Great. As we know, a steward is someone who manages the assets and resources of someone else in a way that other person would want it managed. Okay. So stewardship is a bundle of activities. It's a bundle of duties that we have, and to follow through as a good steward. Stewardism is a little different because it's a mindset. It doesn't end at the end of the day. Doesn't end when the markets close. Okay, it's a mindset. It's a desire to see kingdom resources used to advance economic, social, and spiritual flourishing in obedience to the cultural or creation mandate in Genesis 1:28. So that's what we're trying to do here, is create a mindset of steward. That's why we call it stewardism, because most isms in the world are related to a particular mindset. And we want this to be a living thing, not just a basket of duties.
So in Western culture, we have a tendency to put things into compartments or categories, right? As I'm, even offering to do on this program, ironically, but I'm recognizing that stewardship, as you and I have talked about it, just on our own, is this task list, right? It's a list of things that have to be done or actions that need to be taken. Whereas stewardism then is just a way of going about day-to-day living. Yes?
Yeah, it's thinking with a stewardship mentality in all things, taking all things captive to Christ or the kingdom. All right. So that's the difference. You're right in saying stewardship is a bunch of Maybe duties is one thing. People talk about stewardship. The church likes to talk about stewardship, and what they relate to is how much money are you giving to church? But stewardship's way beyond that. Stewardism gets into the questions like, what do I dare do with what I dare keep?
So, and I love that question. You've asked that to me a number of times about my own life, and in our some of our client conversations at Fideer Advisors, where we're practicing in Minneapolis. My other kind of focus for today that was mentioned earlier is uh, vocational stewardship. Okay, so this is one of the categories that's so critical when we think about, last week or the last session we had together was about the idea of serving being getting more God, right? And so, when if we're going to bring a stewardism mindset to our work, maybe what I want to ask you is, how do we get more God in our work?
Well, let me go back and review how we got to that term, getting more God. Okay, because we went back to that passage in Matthew that tells us we can't serve both God and money, right?
Hmm.
So, how do we serve money? That was the question I asked first. Well, we don't serve money by coming up alongside money to meet its needs. We serve money. In this case, what Jesus is telling us, we're in danger of serving money. And that is organizing our whole life around getting more money and getting more of the blessings that money promises.
Hmm.
That's in contrast to serving God, which would mean getting more God, orienting our life more around the promises that God makes. And of course, we don't serve God by coming up alongside him and meeting his needs. We serve God by working only through the strength that he gives us. And so that's the distinction there when we're talking about serving God as getting more God and orienting ourselves around more God and the promises that he's made.
So, I'm in the process of republishing a book from 10 plus years ago that I wrote, and I'm excited about that process. I realize some of the gaps that are in it, and I don't know that I'll get to fill those gaps. But one of them, in writing at least, one of them is calling. Okay, the topic of calling. Okay, this is important when we consider a vocation and what we're going to do with our, I call it the 8 to 5, the full time job. And, there's a task list there. Okay, so there's stewardship in doing our job. Yes. We can bring stewardism to our job, though, which is the larger thing, the mindset that you're alluding to in these conversations as you further define stewardism. But I still have to get to that job. I have to spend lots of time, energy, money, probably getting to what that job is, right? So I'm in a role, which is a word I like better, where I'm going to use my gifts, my skills, my training, my education, and I'm going to apply those things to, you know, that's my service. Okay. That's my 8 to 5 service, if you will. So it getting to that, right? Whether even if I'm independently wealthy and somehow miraculously not focused on the fact that I'm financially wealthy, I'm just focused on what I'm supposed to be doing. Um, I see a lot of confusion around these conversations, and I don't just mean with recent college grads. Okay, with people who are really wrestling with direction, right? What is God's call for my life? How do I get into the things that I'm supposed to get into? How is it supposed to look? So these are practical questions, but they go right to the heart of what we've been talking about because we spend so much time in our 8 to 5.
Well, you're right. When it comes to job, vocation, You're right in calling that calling. We can have many callings on our life, okay? But you're zeroing in on our professional life or our 8 to 5 life. Keep in mind that what we do 8 to 5, we've spent the formative years of our life training for. And now we're spending the best hours of our week doing it. Okay? If we have trouble reflecting God and his sufficiency and advancing his kingdom and flourishing in the world, we need to take a step back. And if we're in the middle of our career, for instance, and take a look at that. I do run into people that, they've been working 20 or 30 years, they've saved some money, and they say, now I'm going to quit, I'm going to go serve God. Well, my question might be, when you're 5 years in, 10 years in, 8 years in, to be reflecting back and say, am I serving God in my role? Am I advancing the kingdom in what I'm doing? Am I causing or advancing human flourishing to the glory of the kingdom? Now, if you're a manager or a boss, wow, now you're stewarding a whole crew who spent their most formative years training for and are spending their best years or their best hours of the week doing. Are they better because they're working for you? Can they say they're better after a week or a month or 10 years of working with you? So a stewardism mindset would be constantly checking in and asking God for wisdom and reaching out to others. This is why we need each other, why we need a community. We need someone to be watching what we're doing and helping us ask those questions. So vocation is a big topic. But as people prepare for a particular vocation, they need to think about, well, has God gifted me for this? Number one, do I have not only the skills, but the mental ability to be a blessing in that? Or are we mainly focused on whether or not it'll pay enough for us to, have a family and a nice house and a nice vacation? Okay. So all of these, we're asked to think about many different things when deciding vocations, but we want to ask, even if the questions are oriented toward the kingdom.
That's really helpful, Paul. I know that there's so much tied up in how we spend our time that it becomes a question of, are we stewarding that time as well as the tasks within it, right? The responsibilities that we have day to day. And so what I'd like to do is go to a couple of examples after we take a short break.
Rural Music Fest is back, and this year features Seth Schlueter, August 22nd through the 24th at Redemption Hill in Isle, Minnesota. Sing along with Sanctus Real. It's the 4th annual Rural Music Fest with bounce houses for the kids, food trucks, raffles and prizes, and music from over 15 Christian artists like Grammy Award winner Dante Bowe. And closing this year's Rural Music Fest, Colton Dixon. It's the Rural Music Fest, August 22nd through the 24th. Learn about camping, volunteering, see the entire lineup, and RSVP for this free event at ruralmusic.org.
We're back. So we're talking with Paul Larsen. Paul is here as a contributor on A Steward's View regularly. This series is called Living Stewardship, and we've been unpacking the concept of stewardism, a mindset for decision-making, right? Not decision-making about money, as with our standard program on Mondays, but the idea of day-to-day living and all the decisions that go into that, and what we can know and what we can do and how we can approach it. So, Paul, I mentioned a couple of examples that we might give on vocational stewardship, and I'm shuffling papers here and I'm thinking about this. There was a reference that we haven't really touched on in our conversations together, but I have written down, and that is the example of a doctor. Okay, so somebody that goes to med school and makes that decision. There are a couple of different paths that person could take, right? And one is driven by, gosh, there's all these great financial outcomes that can happen if I become a doctor, right? And the other one is driven by, gosh, there are all these great outcomes that can happen for the kingdom if I become a doctor. So maybe we can use that example to start.
Well, I can think of a lot of different ways to consider that. Um, Number one, a quote from Tom Sowell comes to mind that there aren't perfect solutions, there's only trade offs. Okay, so think about the time you put into the schooling for being a doctor. Okay, intense amount of time, a lot of money for school. So you could say, you could look at the end and say, yeah, I'm going to have a really high income, but there's a lot of risk up front because all the time you're doing that, you can't be doing something else. Now, it may be exactly what the Lord wants you to do, but um, to pursue that, I'm hoping the person that pursues that, it's a labor of love, that they can truly see the kingdom advancing. Maybe it's through just helping as a pediatrician, helping babies get to the next stage. Maybe it's research and development. Maybe it's a missionary doctor who helps stop plagues from moving forward, right? There's a lot of ways to advance the kingdom, to bring relief, and to do it in the name of Christ and to the glory and the expansion of the kingdom. But strictly looking at what my income's likely to be at age 45, there's a lot that has to go right, a lot of things that have to happen in the meantime. And if it isn't a deep calling, um, I would slow down.
Mm. Yeah, it can be an empty set of outcomes without that fulfillment, that conviction that goes along with the work. So that's one example. There are so many others that we could go into. The thing that I'll use an example from yesterday in my work. I had a family meeting with a group that I just started serving this family. They're in multiple states, incidentally, but they were all on a Zoom yesterday. And family meetings are wonderful, by the way. It's where legacy and the conversations we've referenced about what we're going to do soon, Paul, you and I, about legacy in these interactions, in these recordings, is we want to build one. But this 2 generations that were on the Zoom call, as I just watched legacy happen, right? It wasn't a certain question I asked. It wasn't a certain, introduction I gave or whatever. But the short version goes like this, and it came right out of Proverbs 10. The first this is mainly the first generation of wealth, mom and dad and mom talking, and I was just struck by the diligence that they had over a long period of time. Their occupations, very much a middle America, 8 to 5, 3-decade career, then retired in their 60s. Okay, that's all fine, but they're now in this transition where they've figured out what they actually need to live out the rest of their lives. And this is pretty common in the fourth quarter, right? I write this in the Life Cycle of Wealth book. There are 4 quarters to life, and that's not new for planners to talk about, but they're in that fourth quarter, and they're going, gosh, we only need, it's about 1 million, a little bit more than $1 million to complete their own missions, right? With the track that they're on in their lives, right? Him and her. The rest of what is today about a $2.5 million, soon a $3 million estate, is they're sending it forward, right, to the next generation, and doing that efficiently as possible. So I was just struck by something that came about in that conversation. I was struck by the diligence that they had to because here it is. There was no one decision that got them to where they were. They just day in, day out, week in, week out, over many decades, approached what they were doing. And this is financial measurement. I realize this isn't, it's falling woefully short of, the kingdom, no matter what I say. But the beautiful point in this was that they delayed gratification over and over and over again. And they even said that when their kids asked them, what did you do? Like there was some secret, right? You're right in front of me. I'm still listening to this.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, well, we just delayed gratification. And we learned that from our parents. Okay. And now here's in that conversation, the third generation asking them questions as they're about to inherit $3 million, right? Maybe two, but 2 to 3. So a very, very powerful example there of, certainly financial stewardship and how that looks. And I mentioned Proverbs 10, it's verse 4, right? That speaks to the diligence involved with this. But the idea that we're delaying gratification or maybe not seeking it for ourselves, right? Maybe we're just going out to serve. We're going out to give something. I talk a lot about givers in my book, okay, and how they operate. And that can be it, can it? Can't we just go out and serve with some direction, right? With some calling, with some skills, talents and skills that we have? Am I missing it?
No, and I think you're put in an opportunity. You're put in a setting where you can be a referee or a master of ceremonies for those kind of conversations and questions that wouldn't have come up between the generations except for you bringing it up in their presence. So that's a great opportunity. Deferred gratification tends to be something people learn mainly by observing, right? But it's also one of the high points of this, what we call the Puritan work ethic.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The Puritans had a very spelled out work ethic, not that it was legalistic, but deferred gratification was a big one because they made plans as if the world was going to be here another 1,000 years.
Mm.
They left the world better than they found it to the extent they could. They went and they found chaos and brought order out of chaos. Okay. They organized the raw material of creation in a way that would advance human flourishing. They met needs and they were paid for meeting those needs, right? And so to be able to pass that on is extremely valuable, especially in a world where what we have is casino capitalism and mercantilism and socialistic schemes of redividing the pie. Someone's got to grow the pie, right? But anyway, so that's really a highlight. But that deferred gratification, if it's missing kingdom in the mentality, it may be missing a real important part. Okay, because someone whose vision is for the future of the kingdom, that doesn't mean you have to give all your money away. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking leaving a legacy of flourishing, which is a legacy that's creating value way after you're gone. And creating value as far as investment returns, maybe, but also creating value, the business that you left behind. Are other people growing to excel in their skills because of that business? Is the community better off because you existed, right? So these are really important questions relative to legacy. And the opportunity to have those discussions between different generations is a real blessing you have, Aaron.
I don't have enough of those conversations, frankly, but that they are a joy. And so I thought I'd bring that to this particular session because of the relevance with legacy at some of these conversations that we're having here. So with that, we've done a little bit more about the difference between stewardship and stewardism in the first segment of this session. We've talked a little bit more about getting, bringing a service or better yet, a kingdom mindset, bringing stewardism to our jobs, right? So vocational stewardship, we've talked about that. We use the example of a doctor going to medical school. And so we touched on legacy here as well. Is there anything else, Paul, that you want to make sure we cover while we're together?
Well, here's a reminder about vocation. When we look forward to the new heavens and new earth, Scripture doesn't tell us we're going to be on a cloud with a harp. New heavens and new earth is going to need vocation. Evangelism is going to end someday, but work isn't going to end. And God, when the new heavens and new earth, He's going to make all things new, but He's not making all new things. So our vocation may truly move right into the kingdom. And many of these vocations will be redeemed. Some of them won't. But the ability to inquire and to organize resources and to meet needs, those are things that are going to go on, I believe, way past evangelism, by the way.
And I don't know about you, Paul, but with all of the digital chaos, all the information overload that comes at us, isn't it kind of hard to maintain that eternal view that you're talking about?
Well, of course it is. But that's the job of our adversary, is to create chaos. So if you're a person that's making order out of chaos, you're an enemy. You're an enemy of our enemy. Okay? So that chaos it manifests itself in many different ways. And what I have found is that that kind of spirit that's trying to gather every bit of information possible is a spirit that's either operating under fear or greed or both. Okay, they want to know the future enough where they can prosper or at least not be destroyed. And there's a very real way where we're taking God's job when we do that. We're supposed to be diligent, deliberate, acting out of love and goodwill, and we're supposed to leave the results up to God. C.S. Lewis wrote the Screw Tape Letters years ago, and if you're familiar with those, you'll know what I'm talking about. If not, you should get familiar. It's a very helpful book. It's
an amazing book.
It represents a dialogue between a senior devil and a minor devil. Okay, and how they're going to treat this individual, and how they're going to do whatever they're going to do to try to derail him. And one of the points was made is, we don't do our best work by putting ideas in people's heads. We do our best work by keeping ideas out of people's heads. How do you keep ideas out of people's heads? With all kinds of noise, right? So do what you can to avoid the noise, and have people around you that can really discern the real issues and do it prayerfully. I think that's going to be a big help, because we're trying to move from fear and greed to productivity and prudence, right? We're trying to move away from these destructive attitudes to much more generative attitudes. So check that in your heart. Am I fearful? Am I operating out of fear or greed? Or am I just trying to be diligent and prudent with what God's given me?
I'll take a pause there. That was so helpful. We talk about tuning out the noise, and I've been doing that since I hosted live radio a decade ago almost. And that was, when I think about it, a time when we were entering into more of a digital realm that we're now in, almost entirely. And I would point to COVID, by the way, as a transition point to where we have more Zoom meetings than we do in-person meetings. That's my experience in the industry I work in anyway. So this digital thing, this chaos, this information overload, this, knowledge versus wisdom, which is a lot of what you're getting at there in your comments, is as real and as problematic as ever.
And that's really why we need each other. We need to be in community. We need to be seeing each other face to face. We need to be in each other's business. Not to meddle, but to help each other see clearly. And one of the things that social networking has done is it's created so much loneliness, because people have been able to get little bursts of dopamine through posting things or seeing posts, but that's not real life. And so we need to find a community. And if you can find people that may be convinced of a stewardism mindset, if you can be part of a group that gathers with that kind of a mindset, that could be really valuable. And maybe there'll be an opportunity for us to organize some groups like that. But we need each other. And when I say each other, I don't mean we need everybody. I mean, we need other spiritually maturing believers around us.
Amen. And Paul, we've had such good conversation here. I hate to try to even find an end point, but for today, I'm just grateful for your contributions. We've been talking, everybody, with Paul Larsen. Paul is the Chief Stewardship Officer at Fidere Advisors and a regular contributor on A Steward's View. You can find him at fidereadvice.com. That's FIDERE advice.com/Larsen, LARSEN. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. It's been such a pleasure to be back with you. I hope this session has been a benefit to you and to others you decide to share it with. We invite you to interact with us online at astewardsview.com or on your favorite podcast platform. From all of us at A Steward's View, we look forward to connecting with you again soon. Until then, please do be wise and decide well.
You've been listening to A Steward's View. To learn more about Fidere Advisors or speak with Aaron, visit fidereadvice.com. That's FIDERE advice.com. To listen to this and other episodes of A Steward's View, visit astewardsview.com. A Steward's View is brought to you by Fidere Advisors, a registered investment advisor offering financial planning and asset aggregation. Asset aggregation systems are designed to align portfolios across accounts into a single, globally optimized investment plan for families it serves. Fidere maintains liquidity of client capital at major custodians and utilizes asset managers that have shown consistent historical performance through excellent risk management. This program is not an offer to transact any securities and does not constitute a financial planning engagement. Information provided has been prepared from sources believed to be reliable, but is not guaranteed and does not represent all available data necessary for making financial decisions and is for informational purposes only. Fidere and its representatives do not offer tax or legal advice through Fidere. Please consult the appropriate advisor. Fidere Advisors LLC is a registered investment advisor. To discuss your situation or to learn more about Fidere, please visit fidereadvice.com. That's FIDERE advice.com.